Hi, and welcome to the Sword Fern Trail activity. Follow me!
This video is intended to provide you with the skills you need to lead an educational activity in a local forest with a group of students. The objectives for this activity are to provide examples of plant species native to the Lower Mainland, to demonstrate how to make scientific observations and descriptions of plant species for classification, to provide guidelines for sustainable activities in nature with the Leave No Trace initiative, to provide examples of how biotic and abiotic factors can benefit or harm plant species, and to provide examples of the effect of sustainable and unsustainable forest practices on a local ecosystem. Your manual will include various resources and instructions to help guide you on this activity and ensure that you have an adequate amount of background information when interacting with your students. You will see the following sections in your activity manual: the BC Grade 7 curriculum objectives met by this activity, the objectives for the activity, the materials that are required for the students and yourself to complete this activity, vocabulary to provide you with information about unclear terms prior to leading your students, and also as a resource so that you can appropriately respond to student questions. Finally, you'll find the activity instructions. These are split up according to the checkpoints you will encounter and will also provide you with recommended script and action prompts for that checkpoint. It is also advised that you look over these instructions thoroughly before you lead your students on the hike so that you can use your time in the trail efficiently. In this activity, you will be leading the students on a short hike which includes checkpoints along the way that correlate to a discussion topic and questions which are included in your manual. The students should then be prompted to answer the questions that you have asked or discussed in their own workbook. In other words, at checkpoint number 1, this will correlate to your discussion topic number 1 and question number 1 in the student workbook. When you ask the students questions, try and follow this formula when the students are responding. First, be aware of their responses. Note them down in your book if necessary, and be sure to provide positive feedback for all student responses. If someone answers and they're incorrect, you could say, for example, "Okay, we have a suggestion for Douglas fir. Does anyone else have an idea?" Try to avoid negative feedback, which may prevent the students from participating in the future. If someone answers and they are correct, tell them that they are correct and then clarify with the description given below the question. Here are some species and species interactions that you should be familiar with before you go on your hike. First is the western red cedar. This is checkpoint 1. Here, students will be asked to provide scientific observations of this tree in order to understand species classification and discover the tree's species name. It is a coniferous or evergreen tree, but rather than having needles like most coniferous trees, it has flat scale-like leaves. The cones are small and egg-shaped and are usually red in color. In mature western red cedars, the bark is very stringy and will be able to tear off in long strips. It also has a bright orange or red color underneath. The next species that you will interact with on this hike is the sword fern. At checkpoint 2, students will be asked to identify this type of plant and, if possible, the specific species name. You will then describe the 2 other types of ferns that are seen in the Lower Mainland: bracken ferns and deer ferns. Then the students will be asked to count as many ferns as they can see from this checkpoint to checkpoint 3. In the Lower Mainland, the 3 most common types of ferns are sword ferns, bracken ferns, and deer ferns. You can tell them apart by looking at the shape and structure of their leaves. Sword ferns, which you'll see on this trail, have feather-shaped evergreen leaves with sharp serrated edges. Bracken ferns are deciduous and grow in a triangular formation with subgroups of leaves growing in an alternating pattern along their main branch. Deer ferns are also deciduous, with narrower, rounder leaflets than the sword fern. They also do not have a stalk at the bottom of each leaflet, but instead connect to the branch with a flat edge. At checkpoint 3, you will find a Douglas fir. Here, students will have to identify the tree species and then determine its age. The Douglas fir is also a coniferous tree. The needles are flat and green and radiate in a circular arrangement around the branch. The cones have jagged pronged sections between each scale and can range from a gray to green color. For larger, more mature Douglas firs, it can sometimes be difficult to see their cones or needles because they're too high up. But the bark is a very useful tool for classification. The bark of a Douglas fir is very thick with large indentations and grooves. At checkpoint 4, you will find a nursing log. At this point, you will discuss the benefits of nursing logs and also discuss the effects that sustainable and unsustainable forestry practices can have on a forest. Fallen down or cut down tree stumps and logs can provide a new home for other species of funguses, plants, or trees. These logs and stumps are known as nursing logs. As the wood begins to rot or is decomposed by insects and bacteria, there is a release of nutrients which is necessary for future growth. After you have completed all activities of the hike, you may return to the school with your group of students and assist them with any clarifications or questions they have about the activity. Now you are ready to use the skills you have gained from this video and your instruction manual to lead your students on an educational and fun-filled activity in Sword Fern Trail.